What's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a film based on the extraordinary true story of an Olympic champion who survived the unthinkable. A story of courage, survival, and an unbreakable human spirit. Major spoilers ahead, so you've been warned. The film opens with a squadron of fighter planes roaring through the sky, closing in on their target. Out of nowhere, enemy fire erupts from below, threatening to tear them apart midair. But these pilots refuse to go down. Somehow fighting through the chaos, they manage to drop their bombs directly on the target and pull away. From there, the story takes us back in time to a small neighborhood where we meet a young boy named Lewis, an absolute handful from the very beginning. He drinks, he smokes, he gets into trouble at every turn, and no matter how many times his parents sit him down and give him the beating of his life, it makes absolutely no difference. The moment the dust settles, Lewis is right back to his old ways without a second thought. His older brother Peter, on the other hand, couldn't be more different, calm, focused, and everything Lewis is not. One day, Lewis gets caught drinking in the village by a group of locals and does the only thing that comes naturally to him. He runs. And he runs fast. Peter happens to spot him sprinting away and is completely stunned. He's never seen anyone move like that in his life. He catches up to Lewis and pulls him aside, telling him straight up that he has something special, that he could be an incredible runner one day. But Lewis brushes it off immediately, telling Peter that anyone can run like that and that he's nothing out of the ordinary. Peter doesn't let it go. He keeps pushing, keeps encouraging, keeps telling Lewis that there's a real future waiting for him if he's willing to work for it. Eventually, Peter starts training him, and something begins to shift. Not long after, a racing competition is held at school and Lewis signs up. But halfway through, he deliberately slows down, jogging along like he has nowhere to be. He simply doesn't care about winning. Then Peter shouts at him from the sidelines. Two words that light a fire inside him. Lewis snaps. Something clicks and he explodes forward with everything he has, leaving every single competitor in the dust. The crowd is stunned. His coaches can't believe what they just witnessed. And in that moment, Lewis wins, not just the race, but his own belief in himself. From that point on, the montage of his rise is electric. Peter rides alongside him on a bicycle while Lewis trains on foot day after day, pushing harder, running faster, growing stronger. He enters a major qualifying race, one where the winner earns a spot at the Olympics. The race begins and Lewis throws himself into it completely. A rival runner tries to cut him off and knock him down, but Lewis sidesteps him without breaking stride and tears ahead, crossing the finish line first. His parents lose their minds with joy. His brother is over the moon, and the record he sets that day, 4 minutes and 1 second, is something no one at that level had ever seen before. Lewis Zamperini is going to the Olympics. On the train heading to the games, Lewis turns to Peter and tells him to come along, to be there for the moment. Peter jokes back that there's no point watching someone who's just going to lose. Lewis laughs and tells him, "Watch me. Next Olympics, I'm coming home with gold." He boards the train and Peter calls after him with one final piece of advice that will echo through every dark moment to come. No matter what happens, never stop believing in yourself. Never lose your courage. Lewis waves and disappears into the distance. At the 1936 Olympics, his early rounds don't go exactly as planned. The whole family sits around the radio back home hanging on every word, and when the results come in, the mood drops. But then comes the final lap, and just when it seems like the moment has passed, Lewis hears his brother's voice in his head. Something ignites inside him and he explodes into a sprint so ferocious that he runs the last lap in just 56 seconds. A brand new world record that shakes the entire stadium. The crowd erupts. People are screaming his name. Back home, his mother, his father, his brother, all of them burst into tears of absolute joy. Lewis Zamperini has announced himself to the world. His next dream is the 1940 Tokyo Olympics, where he plans to bring home gold for his country. But that dream gets swallowed whole by something far bigger than any race. In 1939, World War II breaks out and the 1940 Tokyo Olympics are cancelled entirely. The world has more urgent things to worry about now. We jump straight to 1943, the middle of the war. Lewis is now a soldier in the United States Army Air Forces, flying bombing missions over enemy territory alongside his crew. Their target is a Japanese military camp and they hit it exactly as planned, just like we saw in those opening moments of the film. But the mission takes a devastating toll. By the time they pull away, their aircraft is badly damaged and one of their crewmates has been seriously wounded. They have no choice. They have to land, and they have to land now. The pilot pushes through his fear, guides the crippled plane down with everything he has, and even when one of the tires blows out on the way down, he doesn't flinch. Somehow, against all odds, he gets them on the ground. A little while later, Lewis is out running, because even in the middle of a war, he never stops. When his friends pull up and deliver new orders, there are men stranded somewhere out at sea, and their unit has been tasked tasked with finding them. They climb back into their plane, the same damaged aircraft that barely survived the last mission, and take off again. It doesn't take long before the consequences of that decision become catastrophic. One engine catches fire, then the second engine fails. With nothing left to work with and no way out, the plane plunges straight into the ocean. Out of everyone on board, only Lewis and 2 of his companions survive. They drag themselves out of the wreckage, cling to the life rafts they manage to pull free, and somehow stay alive in the open sea. Lewis looks at the men beside him, sees the fear on their faces, and refuses to let it take root. One of his companions, a man named Mac, is already convinced they won't make it. Lewis shuts that down immediately. He tells him they are soldiers and they are going to survive this. While searching through what little they manage to salvage, Lewis finds a small amount of food, a few chocolates, and 1 bottle of water. He immediately lays down the rules. 1 small piece of chocolate in the morning, 1 in the evening. They have absolutely no way of knowing how long they'll be out there. Days pass. They float in the middle of the ocean with nothing but water in every direction as far as the eye can see. On the second day, a plane appears overhead and their hearts leap. They wave frantically, desperate to be seen. The plane flies straight past without a second glance. Their hope crashes back down to earth. Then Lewis notices the chocolate is completely gone. Mac had eaten everything during the night because he was hungry. Lewis doesn't explode, but he makes it very clear that what Mac just did may cost them their lives. And he was right. 3 days in and they are already starving, their faces gaunt and hollow, whispering prayers up to whoever might be listening. Then a bird lands on the raft. Lewis and his companion exchange a long look, and without a word, they catch it and eat it. But their stomachs, weakened from days without food, reject it violently, and they're left even worse off than before. Then Lewis has an idea. They use pieces of the bird as bait and start catching fish from the ocean. It's raw, it's awful, it's nothing any human being would willingly choose to eat, but it keeps them alive, and that's all that matters right now. Just when they think things can't get worse, a storm rolls in at night and monstrous waves begin crashing over the raft. But then the rain comes, and for the first time in days, they drink until they can't drink anymore. 27 days have now passed when another plane appears above them. They wave, they signal, they do everything they can, but this time, as it gets closer, they realize it isn't American. It's Japanese, and instead of rescuing them, it opens fire. All 3 men dive into the water to avoid being hit, and when they finally drag themselves back onto the raft, they find it riddled with holes. They patch what they can and keep drifting. At 45 days adrift, longer than any human being should be able to survive on almost nothing, Mac's body finally gives out. The starvation, the exposure, the relentless ocean sun. It all becomes too much and he quietly slips away. Lewis and his remaining companion lay him into the sea and sit in silence, waiting for whatever comes next. A few days later, under the brutal glare of the sun, a shadow falls over them. They look up and see a Japanese warship looming above them. The soldiers haul them out of the water and drag them to a Japanese military camp hidden deep in the jungle. The camp commander takes one look at Lewis and recognizes him immediately. He pulls out a newspaper clipping Lewis's photograph from the 1936 Olympics. He knows exactly who this man is, and in the middle of a war between America and Japan that makes Lewis not a celebrity but a target. The soldiers throw both men into a dark room and the beatings begin that very night. The next morning they are stripped and forced to kneel on the ground in front of the other prisoners. Lewis breaks down. Tears stream down his face, and for the first time in all of this, the weight of everything crashes over him completely. After some time, they are transferred to a larger Japanese prisoner of war camp, a place filled with thousands of captured American soldiers who have been enslaved and broken down over months and years. The moment they arrive, the atmosphere hits like a wall. Fear, suffering, and total despair hang over every corner of that place. The man in charge introduces himself to the new arrivals, a Japanese corporal whose name translates roughly to the bird, and he makes it brutally clear from the very first moment that every American in that camp is the enemy and will be treated accordingly. Lewis makes the mistake of catching his eye. The bird marches straight over to him and smashes him across the face with his stick, telling him never to look at him again. That night, the prisoners are taken to their sleeping quarters, conditions so wretched that no animal should be kept in them, let alone human beings. But they have no choice. The next morning, the bird gathers everyone together and asks if there is an Olympic athlete among them. Lewis raises his hand. The bird has one of his own men race against Lewis, but Lewis is so depleted, so broken down by weeks at sea and days of beatings, that his legs give out beneath him almost immediately. He collapses to the ground. The bird walks over slowly, looks down at him, and tells him that he is nothing, that he was never worthy of the Olympics, and then begins beating him right there on the ground in front of everyone. And it becomes clear to Lewis in that moment that the bird has singled him out. He knows Lewis isn't ordinary. He knows this man won't break easily, and that terrifies him. Some of the prisoners attempt an escape plan, but it fails miserably. When the bird finds out, those men are dragged out and punished so severely that what follows is almost too difficult to watch. One afternoon, Lewis and another prisoner are looking up at the sky during work and quietly notice shouting to each other that American planes have been flying increasingly closer. The bird catches them talking. That night, he drags them both out of their sleep and beats them with a belt until they can barely move. Then something unexpected happens. A Japanese radio crew arrives at the camp and approaches Lewis with an offer. They tell him that the American military has officially declared him dead and his family believes he is gone. They ask if he would like to send a message home to let them know he is still alive. Lewis agrees. He walks into the radio room and speaks into the microphone, his voice cracking with emotion. He tells his family not to worry, that he is alive, that he is in a Japanese training camp, that everything is fine. He lies to protect them from knowing the truth of what is happening to him. He tells his father to have his gun ready because when he gets home they are going straight hunting. He tells his mother how much he misses her cooking. And then, at the very end, he whispers Merry Christmas to all of them and breaks down completely. The radio crew returns the next day with a piece of paper and tell him to sign it. They want him to go on air and say negative things about America, to use his name and his fame as propaganda against his own country. Lewis reads it, sets it down, and refuses to sign. They push him again, promising him comfort, better food, an easier life if he just cooperates. He looks them in the eye and says no. They send him back to the camp where the bird is waiting for him. The bird tells Lewis that he recognized his strength from the very first day, that they could have been equals in another life, but because Lewis is American and because the bird despises Americans with every part of himself, that can never happen. Then he does something that becomes the most haunting scene in the entire film. He lines up every American prisoner in the camp and orders each one of them to walk up and punch Lewis in the face. When the prisoners refuse, the bird brings out Lewis's companion, badly beaten, barely standing, and threatens to kill him right there unless the punches start landing. Lewis looks at his friend, looks at the men around him, and tells them to do it. Come forward. Hit him. One by one they do, every single man in that camp walking up and striking Lewis across the face while the bird watches. By the end, Lewis is unrecognizable, but his friend is alive. Winter comes and the camp holds a small comedy show so the prisoners can find some fragment of warmth and laughter in the freezing cold. The bird sits down next to Lewis and casually mentions that he has received a promotion. He will be leaving the camp. Lewis quietly celebrates inside. With the bird gone, maybe they can breathe again. But the relief doesn't last long. A bombing raid hits the camp and destroys most of it, forcing all the prisoners to be transferred to a new location. When they arrive and line up, Lewis looks up, and standing there waiting for them is the bird. His world collapses all over again. His legs buckle and his companions grab him before he hits the ground. This new camp is even worse. The prisoners here are skeletal and barely functioning, yet they are forced to unload coal from ships in the freezing cold day after day. One prisoner loses his footing on a ledge from sheer exhaustion and falls to his death right in front of everyone. The guards show no reaction. Not long after, an enemy soldier deliberately shoves Lewis from a height and he crashes to the ground, badly injured. He gets back up and keeps working, because what else is there to do? Then comes the scene that everyone who watches this film will never forget. Lewis pauses to catch his breath during a shift and a guard drags him straight to the bird. The bird points to a massive, impossibly heavy wooden beam on the ground and orders Lewis to pick it up. Lewis is starving, freezing, and barely able to stand, but he reaches down and lifts it. The bird tells him to raise it above his head. Lewis does. Then the bird turns to one of his soldiers and tells him quietly, if that beam comes down, shoot him. The seconds stretch out. The wood begins to tremble. Lewis's arms shake with the weight of it. Every prisoner in that camp stops what they are doing. All eyes are on him. The beam slowly starts to lower and silence falls over everything as every man holds his breath, wondering if this is the moment they watch Louis Zamperini die. And then Lewis hears his brother's voice. Clear as day, Lewis lets out a roar from somewhere in his chest and drives that beam back above his head. He turns and stares directly into the bird's eyes. The bird loses control. He screams at Lewis to stop looking at him, charges forward and begins beating him with everything he has. Fists, stick, over and over. But Lewis keeps his eyes locked on him. Every memory floods back. His training, his family, his brother, the Olympics, the ocean, all of it, and none of it breaks him. Eventually, the bird stops. Not because he wants to, but because he is physically exhausted. He drops to the ground. Some weeks later, all the prisoners are gathered together and a Japanese officer announces that they will be allowed to bathe in the river. The prisoners exchange uneasy glances. Is this the end? Are they being taken out to be executed? They wade into the water in silence. Then a plane appears on the horizon. It grows larger, and when it gets close enough for everyone to see the markings on its wings, American, the entire camp erupts. Screaming, crying, laughing, men dropping to their knees in the river. The war is over. Japan has surrendered. They are free. The planes circle back and begin dropping supply packages, food, water, medicine raining down from the sky. Lewis stands among his fellow prisoners watching it all, still processing the reality of what is happening. Before leaving, he tries to find the bird. He needs to face him one more time, but the bird is already gone. one. Louis sits alone for a moment and looks through a photograph from his childhood. The boy who used to run from trouble in a small village, who never thought he was anything special, and he lets it sink in that he made it. He comes home to America, and the moment his feet touch the ground, he drops to his knees and kisses the earth. Then he finds his family and holds them and weeps. After the film ends, we are shown real photographs of Louis Zamperini. We learn that he married in 1947 and went on to have 2 children. His companion from the raft and the camps also survived the war, settled down, and built a life of his own. The bird, officially labeled a war criminal, spent years in hiding, his whereabouts unknown to the world for a long time. Years later, Louis returned to Japan, not out of anger, but to find the man who had made it his mission to destroy him. The bird refused to meet him, and in the end, the most remarkable detail of all, at 80 years old, Louis Zamperini ran again. He carried the Olympic torch through the streets of Japan. The man who was declared dead, who survived 45 days at sea, who endured years of torture in a prisoner of war camp. He ran one more time. Because records are made to be broken, and so are the men who try to break you. If the story kept you hooked, hit that like button, and if you're new here, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a breakdown.